Okay, so let's talk about biographies. But, not the kind you'd find on a dusty library shelf. We're going to dive into something different today: how to build what we might call a magical biography. This is all about a really deep, personal excavation of who you actually are. It all kicks off with this really powerful idea. What if your life story wasn't just a list of things you've done? What if it was filled with hidden Easter eggs? Those tiny, almost random details that prove you were really there. The secrets you might have even forgotten yourself. So yeah, let's just throw out the usual timeline. Forget the resume, forget the major achievements. This isn't a historical record. Think of it more like an archaeological dig into you. We're carefully dusting away the layers of time to find the hidden artifacts of our own lives. And the treasures we're looking for in this dig, they have a name: place markers. Now, these aren't the big, dramatic memories. A place marker is something much smaller, a tiny sensory fragment. It could be a specific texture, a sound you haven't heard in years, or a smell that just instantly takes you back. It's that little spark that is absolute, undeniable proof that you were present in that one single moment. So, why do these little sparks matter so much? I mean, they're just tiny memories, right? Well, no. There's so much more than that. They are the ultimate validation, and they all point to one single, incredibly powerful truth. And this is it. This is the core of this entire process. It was. That's the treasure we're digging for. See, finding a place marker isn't really about nostalgia. It's about holding a piece of your past in your mind and knowing with absolute certainty that it was real. It happened. You were there. Okay, so that's the theory, right? But how does this archaeology of the self actually work in practice? Let's join a real-world excavation to see how these place markers are uncovered. So our first artifact is something called an oceophone, an old childhood instrument, and it's shown here as this kind of blurred image for a reason. Because, like a half-forgotten dream, its true details aren't known to the eyes, but to the fingertips. It is a perfect example of a place marker. The real power here is in the contradiction. As you can see, what the eyes remembered was just, swirls of blue that looked smooth. But what the hands knew was a secret truth. It felt rough, kind of like a seashell. That gap, that little bit of friction between sight and touch, that's the spark. That's the proof. And this leads us to a really fascinating question. What happens when a memory just defies logic? When an object in your mind holds two contradictory truths at the exact same time? Well, this is where the real magic begins. Our second artifact is a 70s clock radio. It was found years after its owner, a mother, had passed away. Now, on the surface, it's just a piece of old plastic. But in the landscape of memory, it becomes something so much more profound. And here is the paradox. The person remembering it knew that two things were true at once. The first truth, the truth of time, said dust is on that radio. But the second truth, the truth of sentiment, said the radio was the one clean, sacred thing in the room, while everything else was covered in dust. A memory doesn't have to be logical, it just has to feel true. So here's the crucial point. When you uncover one of these place markers, you're not just finding an old clock. You're finding proof of the alchemy that your own mind performed on it, turning a totally mundane object into a sacred artifact that shines clean right through the dust of time. This personal journey of excavation is, well, it's fascinating. But what's truly powerful is the realization that it actually reveals a universal process, a process that can be turned from one person's story into a tool that we can all use. It turns out the discovery of these sparks, the oceophone, the clock radio, it wasn't just random. It revealed a hidden pattern, a structured process for self-discovery. And if it's a process, that means it can be reverse engineered. And this is where we shift roles. We go from being an archaeologist to becoming an alchemist. The archaeologist looks backward to find those sparks that prove it was. But the alchemist takes those same sparks and uses them to build, to create, and to forge meaning for the future. So this process of reverse engineering led to a blueprint for this kind of alchemy, a tangible framework for conducting your very own excavation. And it's called the 6 p.m. protocol. Now, the name itself is a little bit of an Easter egg, which I love. 6 p.m. stands for the system's 6 core modules, 3 for the digging and 3 for the building. It's a practical guide to the archaeology of you. And here it is, the full protocol laid out.
You can see it's broken into two distinct halves. On the left, you've got the 3M modules. That's your excavation phase, where you become an archaeologist of your own past, just gathering up all the raw materials. Then on the right, you have the 3P modules. That is the alchemy, where you transform those raw materials into a really meaningful story.
So let's look at that first half, the excavation, the M's. We start with mapping, which is basically charting out the known territories of your life, the big events everyone knows about. Then you move to making, where you find the extraordinary in the ordinary, like the secret magic of that clock radio. And finally, you start mining, digging for those true place markers we talked about, the sensory secrets like the feel of the oceanophone that might be hidden even from you.
And then comes the alchemy with the P modules. Providing is all about curating your findings, organizing them into themes, almost like a museum curator would. Picking is where you identify the core story that connects all of them, the perfect plan or the hidden narrative your soul has been on all along. And finally, passing is about distilling that story down into its most powerful, essential form, almost like a thesis statement for your life. You know, the ultimate goal of this whole protocol is empowerment. It's designed to prove that you weren't just a passive witness to your own life, just watching things happen. You were there. You were making choices, seeing magic, creating meaning. You were always an active participant. So, what should you really take away from all this? The 6 p.m. protocol isn't just some cool philosophical idea. It's a practical toolkit, a real system for unlocking the secret stories, finding the hidden patterns, and ultimately creating meaning from the life you've already lived. Which leaves us with one final question to ponder. That dusty object in your attic, that forgotten scent, that unimportant little fragment you think means nothing, what if that's the spark that holds the key to your entire story?